هو الله. الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. أما بعد، قال جل جلاله عم نواله في كتابه المبين: وزللنا عليكم الغمامة وأنزلنا عليكم المن والسلوى كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم وما ظلمونا ولكن كانوا أنفسهم يظلمون وإذ قل ندخلوا هذه القرية فكلوا منها حيث شئتم رغدا وادخلوا الباب سجدا وقولوا حتة نغفر لكم خطاياكم وسنزيد المحسنين فبدل الذين ظلموا قولا غير الذي قيل لهم فأنزلنا على الذين ظلموا رجزا من السماء بما كانوا يفسقون. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد معظم الجود والكرم وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم وسل عليه. So, in the previous occasion, we looked at how the people of Musa alayhi salam, aka Bani Israel, made demands from Musa alayhi salam over and above the norm. It's as if the thought that comes to my mind, there's an expression in English, it's as if they had a chip on their shoulder. This is an expression in English. It's as if they deserved what they asked for. They had been persecuted, and as a result of that persecution, they thought they were deserved. That's a psychology which people don't actually look at. They just whiz through these facts and figures and that's it. But what is at stake here is a psychology. We have been wronged. We deserve. And that state of mind is quite dangerous. If you look at the world today in which we live, when we are wronged, sometimes our mind, our psychology, allows us to commit sins on the basis that, well, we were wronged. And again, I could give a number of examples, but the one that comes to my mind is child abuse. Children who were, for example, physically abused when they were young, they rehearse that behavior without realizing that they have become the tyrants of the tyranny which they suffer in themselves. And actually, if you look at biographies of tyrants, you will see there is always an element of suffering. Whether that suffering is caused voluntarily or involuntarily, there is something that goes wrong that causes them to behave in an abnormal way. So, one thing which no Mufassir has picked up on this point is that these people who migrated with Musa alayhi salam actually, had a chip on their shoulder. They thought years and years of persecution we are owed. Rather than just simply calling it quits and saying, thanks God, we've been relieved from this, pharaonic rule where we were treated like worse than animals, and then just call it a day at that. No, they persisted In fact, the first complacency arose when they had migrated. Now the question is, where did they go? So there was talk of a promised land, and where that promised land is, some say it was Syria, some say it was Jerusalem, whatever. The point is, they were promised, go. But that land which was their promised land, it wasn't, there's your reward, go and get it. What Allah Azza wa Jal had planned was that they should now flee from that psychology of the persecuted to the psychology of the conqueror. That's therapy. Psychologists now are realizing that there are therapies that are considered to be very unconventional, but sometimes a trauma can be, a trauma of the past can be annihilated by a conquest of the future. That's, unless you've not been through trauma yourself, you don't realize what I'm talking about. When a person goes through trauma, whatever the nature of that trauma is, and especially, which 9 times out of 10 is the case, that trauma leaves a scar in your system, and sometimes more than a scar, it operates in the third sector of your brain, mind, as I often say, and it affects your complexes without you realizing it. The therapy is not drugs. Here, have a dopamine to take you out of it all, or have a drug to allow you to escape from it, or here's a antidepressant that slows your mind. The remedy has to be a natural remedy, and people of tafsir don't even talk about this. They just say, "Yep, this is what happened. This is what happened. Let's march on." Why would Allah Azza wa Jal tell Bani Israel, now go and, this is your promised land, but it's not going to be put on a plate for you, you have to go and conquer it? And what was their response? Oh, no, we're not going to conquer. We're not going to declare war. We've done our, we've done our fair share in life. It's like the shopkeeper in Manchester. I'll never forget, at 3 p.m. his shutters were coming down, and I said, says 5 p.m. he says, I've done my business for the day, and that's it. So rather than thinking, no, right, we're done. Now from here on has to be the good life. But there's no such a thing as a good life with work, rest and play on the standards that man anticipates for himself. Of course, work, rest and play on the standards that Allah anticipates. But no, they refused outright to, we're not going to do it. We are not going to take this land by force. They took this very complacent attitude, as a result of which Allah made them roam. Allah made them roam. And they roamed the Sinai Peninsula for 40 years. And the way it worked was that at night they would travel, because at night it's cool. And in the daytime they would rest, and they would end up in the same place. So they went, if you allow me to use that lovely expression of mine, round and round the garden like a teddy bear. They went round and round the garden. You see, what do we extract from that? That if Allah Azza wa Jal offers you an opportunity out of your trauma and shows you a door, and you don't take that, well, then you're just going to go round and round in circles. So for 40 years, you may not realize these words. They may just seem words or sentences, but to people who go through this, this is very deep. So for 40 years, in their own self-pity and misery, they roamed. And I'm sorry, that's what I see with a lot of people today. They have been subjected to X, Y, and Z, and they just live off that. Yes?
When you talked about child abuse, you're saying that people sometimes unknowingly it affects their psychology. Is there an element of mitigation in their behavior from an Islamic perspective?
You see, of course, Allah Azza wa Jal is the ultimate judge, and He, judges accordingly. But the Sharia takes a very black and white view. If an offence is committed, an offence is committed. But one of the greatest tragedies which scholars have committed in the last 200 years, they haven't talked about mitigation. They've talked about the offence, but they haven't really, in our books, where do you find scholars talking about mitigation? About these things.
Does that concept not exist then in Islam?
Sorry? No, it does exist. It does exist. Allah mitigated their behavior. They caused offence to Allah. For example, they refused to follow Allah's order. Allah could have punished them outright. But Allah mitigated, or took into account the mitigating factors. That they are tired, they've been through so much. We're not talking about a couple of years of slavery. We're talking about generations of slavery here. So yes, Allah and His Rasul do mitigate. But regrettably, and of course His noble companions were renowned. I mean, what better example of mitigation could I offer you than the example of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, who in the process of mitigating the had of theft, of cutting off hands, he said no. If a thief steals for hunger and the theft is rooted in hunger, then the had will not apply. What will apply? Ta'zir will apply. Ta'zir means judicial discretion. And on that basis, he acquitted the offender. Or on some occasions, there was a sentence given, but it wasn't the had, which was the... If that's not mitigation, what else is mitigation? Because the state, the Islamic law has been controlled by the state. And the state has its own agenda. And it's not in the interest of the state to have a uniform law, because then it's not open for abuse. If everything is written down, there's no scope for abuse. So to keep it fluid, rulers, Muslim rulers, not Islamic rulers, Muslim rulers, there was codification of Islamic law, but the depth of codification which can still possibly be done, it's just not there. Because ulama of today aren't lawyers, and lawyers of today aren't ulama. So they don't see how to complement the two things together. This example of Sayyidina Umar mitigating the had of theft, I mean, this has got to be. And remember, he's not just mitigating, we're talking wahi, we're talking, something which Allah, but that also then, sorry to change the subject, shows you the power of a Khalifa Rashid. Only a Khalifa Rashid could do that. He could vary or distinguish the command, because of that's what you call Rashidiyat. Otherwise, Rashidiyat is not just a badge which says I am a Khalifa Rashid. There's legal consequences to being part of Rashidiyat, which is the 30 years. Anyway, so Allah offered them a therapy out of their trauma which they had suffered. Because remember, when you suffer trauma, just being released from it isn't the solution. If you allow me to quote a shair of Urdu, it's about a little Bajrigar who lived in a beautiful garden in a cage, and she was released because apparently some arsonist decided to destroy the garden. So she said, the little Bajrigar said in the words of the poet, आशियां जल गए, गुलिस्तान लुट गए, अब कफस छोड़ के किधर जाएंगे हम? The garden is abandoned, the cages have opened and they've been, dislocated. Ab kafast, where will I now go after this imprisonment? I've been imprisoned all my life. Ashiyan jal gaye, गुलिस्तान लुट गए, अब कफस छोड़ के किधर जाएंगे हम? इतने मानूस हो गए सयाद से, अब मिलेगी रिहाई तो मर जाएंगे हम. I've become so attached to my captor, to my master, that now if I'm released from this cage, I'll die. Being released from abuse or trauma isn't just the solution. There is an aftermath, which here Allah Azza wa Jal acknowledged and said, He could have put it on a platter for them, and here you are. Here's a land, walk into it, off you go. Yes.
Are you then referring to the culture of victimhood that we see everywhere now?
Exactly.
Feel aggrieved, so I'm entitled.
Exactly. And where does that stem from? Bani Israel. It comes from Bani Israel. And these waqiyats are not here just, Nauzubillah, as a jackanory, here you are, just for you, to entertain you. No. There is ibrah. There is deduction from this relevant to you in your lives. That at one juncture or another, you may be subjected to trauma or even wrong. And the emancipation from that isn't just to be released. It's the ongoing impact of that trauma that you suffered. So Allah offered them therapy. What was the therapy? The therapy was conquer. Now if Allah is saying conquer, for goodness sake. I sometimes ask myself this question. It wasn't their fault, they didn't know this. But we know this through the benefit of retrospect. You've heard of the Ark of the Covenant, haven't you? The massive trunk. And it's the talk of the town, Ark of the Covenant, Ark of the Covenant. But what was in the Ark of the Covenant? We're going to talk about the Ark, by the way. I'm not just skimming the surface. We're going to talk about the Ark. But what was in the Ark that was so special? Sorry? Yes. That's not only what was in the Ark. Huh? The Barakat. From Musa alayhi salam, Harun alayhi salam. In fact, there's one riwayah which a long time ago I read. From 124,000 prophets, every prophet had their tabarruk in that. But at least the Quran alludes to, whether that hadith you can locate or not, at least the Quran alludes to the fact that there was tabarruk of Musa alayhi salam in there. Now, they knew that if that ark is with us, victory is ours. If Musa's tabarruk, his staff, his shoes are in a ark, and that can guarantee you victory, what about Musa alayhi salam himself? And Bani Israel, they just didn't get it. They didn't realize who is with us. This is a man who talks to Allah. No, Allah said this. No, we're not going to do it. Look at the defiance. No, we're not going to do it. And Musa alayhi salam didn't say, right, see you later. I'm done with you. I've done my job. I freed you. No, he said, fine. He roamed with them. He could have said, oh Allah, what? No. He had to endure what they had to endure because they were his mission. So he didn't complain and say, well, let me just pick a few good ones and they can come with me and to hell with the rest of them. No. Musa alayhi salam, he chose them and he chose to be with them. And Harun alayhi salam. And in fact, so much so, so goes the chronology, that Musa alayhi salam actually, the night before, when they were coming into the promised land, or when they were, if not the night before, in the sort of last lap, Musa alayhi salam passed away. In fact, even before then, Harun alayhi salam passed away. So their objective wasn't the promised land, Musa alayhi salam. He was just guiding it, even though they were going round and round in circles. And Musa alayhi salam knew. But despite that knowledge, he was not allowed to reveal it to them. He was not, despite that, prophets have a sense of navigation. You know, if Zulqarnain can travel the earth without satellite navigation, you think it's difficult for Musa alayhi salam? And when the Prophet ﷺ goes on the night of Miraj, Allah says, "Ma dalla sahibukum wa ma ghawa." Your guide did not go wrong. The navigation was not wrong. They know exactly what's where, who's who. So Musa alayhi persevered with them. In fact, it was Yusha bin Nun, Hazrat Yusha bin Nun, who actually led the conquest into the Holy Land, and or the land, the Promised Land. But it wasn't limited just to Jerusalem. What is known as Syria today this was all part of that same sort of land. Anyway, coming back onto that, the real point, which is Allah offered them a therapy. They didn't accede to it. So Allah said, fine then, carry on. Go around the garden. And that's exactly what happened to them. And that's exactly what happens to people who don't search for corrective therapy and just live in the past and allow the past to continue to influence them. They go round and round in circles. They don't move forward. They don't have traits of development. In fact, forget traits of development. They don't have an appetite to develop. They are stagnant human beings. There's no quest. Have I developed as a human? And I don't see that quest today in many Muslims, which saddens me, because this legacy was there to show you that, look, remember what I said in the lecture last, Deen isn't just about regulation, it's about development. If you have not been released from that which imprisons you, well then, either you are not understanding Deen, it can't be the other way around. Deen understands you, Deen has the options for you. So therapy, there you are, conquer. They refused. So they went round and round. Now, in that state of going round and round, they developed these habits. And these are habits of such people who have no source of, who have no appetite to develop, to move forward in life. They just go round and round, and then they ask for things. I want this, I want this. And then you know what the funny thing is? When they are given those things, they're still not grateful. That's exactly what happened to Bani Israel. Look at this, is the headline. When they are given things, they're still not grateful. I often have discussions with people who have endured trauma, and then I remind them, have you not looked at this, what Allah gave you? Looked at this, what? Oh, they say, oh, we didn't look at it like that. But this is exactly the trait of Bani Israel. That in that frame of mind, because there's no, developmental appetite. So whatever then they receive from Allah, it's like, it doesn't affect their mindset. Now, Bani Israel were given some serious, privileges. But if you break your own life down and you think of all the privileges Allah has given you, despite you having gone through what you've gone, لا تحصوها, you can't count it. وإن تعدوا نعمة الله فلا تحصوها, you can't count it. But we like to focus on the miserable parts, and those parts that will encourage us to face forward, we don't like to emphasize on them. Yes?
Would you equate victimhood with ingratitude?
Sorry?
Would you equate victimhood with ingratitude?
I'm so sorry, I couldn't. Would I equate victimhood
With ingratitude.
I still don't understand the question.
Would you equate the two? The people who suffer from this affliction of victimhood, basically their ingratitude stops them from going forward.
Yes. That's exactly what's happening here. And that's exactly what's happening to people today. Is that whilst they have been victims of X, Y or Z, they are not expressing gratitude to that which Allah has given them. In fact, some of them end up, not all, some of them end up repeating what they were subjected to themselves.
It's having that victim mentality, which is...
Yes, which is a license then to do whatever they like. You know, I knew a person who went bankrupt and he lost everything and he turned to alcohol. And I said, well, think about it. Why did you go bankrupt in the first place? There's always a history behind it. Bani Israel weren't just, Allah didn't just decide, oh, you know, I feel that these people should suffer. They were imprisoned by Fir'aun. If you look at their history, it wasn't that just Fir'aun just decided to, no. If you and we will inshallah in time look at the biography of Bani Israel under the premiership of Fir'aun, how it came about. They weren't, I mean, some of them were born slaves, but slavery wasn't something that just came upon them. It was because of their actions in the first place. But that also doesn't mean to say that every victim has done wrong in order to be the subject of suffering. Sometimes you could just inherit a legacy, or he could just be, or he or she could find himself in circumstances like this. This then goes back to the philosophical question that how can there be a just God who allows someone to suffer who hasn't wronged? You see? And such questions are narrow-minded and short-sighted because they don't look at the bigger picture. If Allah has placed a weight upon a shoulder, so He says Himself, لن يؤخر الله نفسا إذا جاء لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها. Allah chooses the shoulders and quantifies weight in accordance with what He as the manufacturer knows those shoulders can bear. What your shoulders can bear, I may not be able to bear. So Allah chooses, one to bear this, one to bear that. And I say, no, I want to choose this. Why were prophets subjected to so much? Were they, na'uz billah, wrongdoers? No. Allah gave them that to show people that, look, these prophets who are innocent, ma'soom, anil khata, I have given them pain and trial and tribulation. And what do? What's their psychology? They turn to me. And in me they find refuge. But no, when we go through turmoil and difficulty, we don't turn to Allah. Or when we turn to Allah, it's either I turn to you on my terms or no terms. Either you do as I say, or if you don't do as I say, I'm sorry, I'm no deal. And that's how people deal with Allah. Well, you didn't do as I said, I wanted this and you didn't give me this. No. Allah, if you entrust Allah, that's why the Prophet ﷺ taught us that dua. وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, I leave my matter up to Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَصِيرٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. So, what is at stake in these verses is something far more intricate than just, a story. There's a lot here for us to evaluate and apply in our own lives. So, they roamed. وَزَلَّلْنَا عَلَيْكُمُ الْغَمَامَ, and we invested upon you a cloud. For those of you who know geography, know that the Sinai Peninsula and that region is a very hot region. And to bear the blaze of the sun, I mean, they didn't have sun cream that they could sustain it. it was a very serious matter. Despite being, remember these people were people who lived in an area where they had, creature comforts, but now they're in a desert. The burning blaze is upon them. So they went to Musa alayhi salam and said, well, can you ask Allah to help us out here? This burning blaze isn't... And when at night, if any of you have been in a desert, you'll know, if there's no moon, it is pitch black. I mean, there is no way you're going to navigate in a desert at night without the moon. So, this cloud, ghamam, this cloud in the day used to follow them. White cloud used to follow them. And it used to give them shade from the sun. Subhanallah. Musa alayhi salam's ummati, this is first class service. Not economy class, first class service. Here you are, shade from the sun. And then at night, where there was no moon, it would light up to give enough light for them to see each other. How beautiful is that? Science has discovered that yes, a cloud does shield us from the sun, but how a cloud can emanate light. We've got as far as seeing lightning in a cloud, but how a cloud can generate light, well, electricity is the answer. And a cloud is, after all, a mujassama of water. And water and electricity, the combination. Anyway, so this ghamam was provided for them. وَأَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَنَّ وَالسَّلْوَى. Now, there's manna was salwa. These are two separate diets. Because man came first. And man was the sweet. Most mufassirin say this was the sweet content of heavenly delights. It was the sweet content. And salwa was the salty. So the rule of eating in fitrah is sweet first, then salty. Even now, I was in South Africa a few days ago when time for food came, they bought the sweet dish first. Initially, when I used to go to South Africa, I first sat to eat the food and they had the sweet dish and I said, have I just missed a whole meal? I said, no, you start off with this. It's very good. It's sweet first. And those who know that when you consume sugar and then salt on top, sugar cannot impact you the way it impacts you right at the end. I mean, we pile, the fifth course on, disproportionately. Although having a small amount of, shakkar afterwards or kajur afterwards is fine. But when you have a massive trifle, which is disproportionate to the actual food that you've eaten, then you're asking for trouble. Anyway, sugar in itself is not a problem. Never has been a problem. This theory that, sugar causes diabetes, this is all the same hype, commercial hype, that, you had once upon a time when they wanted to take away ghee from you and introduced oil. Have synthetic oil. This is not good for you, it's got cholesterol in it, all this. Now they're coming back to the, no, you can take our ghee, the one that we produce. It's all a gimmick. So sugar in itself, and why do I say that? I say that because prophets, including the Prophet ﷺ, used to like sugar, halwa. So if something has been liked by prophets, it can never be harmful. But why does sugar harm us today and cause diabetes? It's not the sugar, it's the way sugar is processed. Yeah, it's all these artificial sweeteners. These are the causes, not the sugar itself. I see, honestly, if you don't believe me, I see people in the Fiji Islands, 95, 90-year-old people. How much sugar would you like in your tea? Four spoons, please. Oh yes. And there was one old man I saw, his grandchild put about 6-7 spoons in, and he goes, not enough. Put more sugar. So sugar itself, I mean, they have organic sugar there. So, organic sugar is organic sugar. But no. So man was the sugar. So the sugar comes first. And then they got fed up of it. And then they went to Musa and said, can we have a different menu, please? Do you see what I mean? Never happy. It's never enough. I mean, as if man being provided food in a desert, sweet food, complacent. No. Can we have a different taste, please? So salwa came. And if that wasn't they still complained after that. As we're going to see in a minute. But the man and the salwa were effectively food that came from the heavens. What the detail of that food is not relevant. There's different aqwal. Some say the salwa was a particular bird. Some say man was this. Not relevant. What is relevant? Allah ordained it from this. Musa alayhi salam did dua, and upon the dua of Musa alayhi salam, Allah sent this food in a region that was not prone to receiving such kind of foods. Only for Bani Israel. I mean, imagine that. Sending food to them in this overtly manner. And if that wasn't... No? Still not happy. In fact, one Mufassir has written a very interesting analysis, and I'm not going to attribute it to myself. He said that up till that point in history, food did not degenerate. But what Bani Israel started doing is hoarding. Oh, you know that word, don't you? Oh yes. We are born hoarders. We live in a world of hoarding, whether that's hoarding clothes, whether that's hoarding shoes, whether that's hoarding food, whether that's hoarding... I mean, when the coronavirus broke out, this gentleman in Lozells in Birmingham, he filled his whole front room up with basmati rice. I mean, I won't reveal his nationality to you. Well, I mean, whatever goes, isn't it? I mean, he couldn't live without rice. I mean, if it was an Englishman, it would be baked beans. Huh? Well, that would be Italian, isn't it? Yeah. We are hoarders. In our mind, in our external life we hoard, and in our internal life we hoard. We hoard thought. We don't let go of things. We just keep things in our mind so that they are a reference. And that's why we have such complicated lives. We are hoarders. So, they became hoarders. Allah said, listen, I'm giving you a fixed amount. Eat today and you'll get another amount tomorrow. No, it wasn't good enough. They took it home. And then if food started... I mean, they didn't have fridges. That doesn't mean to say, by the way, anyone who hears this thinks that I'm now against fridges. But, at the end of the day, common sense must apply. I mean, yes, you can, keep food which hasn't been used. You can prepare food in advance. But if your psychology is, I'm preparing food because I don't know if I'll have food, 5 days down the line, that's an insecurity. You are hoarding. Tawakkal in Allah must be, like Musa alayhi salam when he was about to go to Bani Israel, go to fight Fir'aun. I think I've said this waqia or not. The 7 stones, the waqia of the 7 stones. I don't want to repeat it. Huh? Huh?
Stuff from the stone.
Yeah. Oh Allah, how is my family going to live? He struck the stone 7 times and an insect had something. Oh Musa, if I can look after an insect in 7 stones and feed it, you think I can't feed your family? But we suffer from these insecurities. And, if we cast our mind back to that verse where Allah, when He extradited us, not extradited, when we were deported from Jannah, our nationality was taken off us. Ihbitu minha jami'an. Out. No more nationality. You are now earthly beings. However, فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُم مِّنِّي هُدًى. Remember that verse. For sure will come to you from me guidance. فَمَن تَبِعَ هُدَايَ. He who follows that guidance, I don't promise the increase in your bank balance. I don't promise any worldly wealth. But I do promise لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. فَمَن تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ. Bani Israel clearly didn't get it, did they? They didn't. Yet they had the company of a prophet. They should have thought, we got this food because of him. Why do we need to hoard? If it runs out, we'll just go back to him. But no. See that psychology? That victim mentality. Oh no. Got to hoard it. So they hoarded it. And food and one Mufassir has written that was the first time that food started to behave in that way, of being affected by hoarding. So Manna and Salwa was revealed from the heavens. Yes.
Assuming this was the same type of food every day, is this a hint to us as well that we're so ungrateful with the amount of variety that we want nowadays?
Spot on. Nowadays, people have become so spoilt for choice, and we live at the brink of a new culture. Your parents, if you look at their biographies, they didn't used to eat out. They didn't used to eat out. I mean, for them, once a year to eat out was like a big thing. Now, this generation, once a week, twice a week. But I'm telling you, the next generation is going to go French. Oh yes. I mean, French people have this. I read a research. Out of all Europeans, if the most prosperous restaurants are actually in France, possibly Italy, because there's such a culture of eating out. So much so that it's, what is it? Variety. It's that lack of contentment. I'm not suggesting you customize your diets to having baked beans 7 days a week, but the point is, you within sense. But no, something new, always something new. I once went to a restaurant. I mean, I didn't eat there, but I just said, how much is it per head? And he said, £500 per head. I said, £500 per head? How much can a person eat in £500? It's still going to be the same as, a bag of chips. I mean, proportionally, it's still going to be the same. And then just to make the restaurant feel better, I said, your 500 is still going to be in the same places. My bag of chips, they're all going in the same place. And he got really offended. I said, you can carry on doing what you like. £500 for food? I mean, what, are there wings in this food or something that, it flies? But it's just, what it is? This is what you call sales. It's what you call pitching stuff that never allow you to become content. You've got a wardrobe full of clothes and but no, when you go shopping, you've got this scratch. Oh, I need to buy that. That's nice. And that's it. Same concept. Complacency. And I ask, why? Okay, if you need clothes, that's fine, no problem. But no, because this is in. And what I have is out. It's just unbelievable. We have become, I'm sorry to use this word, I don't mean to offend anyone. The commercial arena grooms our mind into making us behave in a certain way. That no matter how much we have, it's never enough. It's just never enough. So, that's why I like, countries like Fiji Islands, where, for those of you who haven't been, I met a gentleman, I think he's still alive. His grandchildren are, very wealthy people. But up till this day, he drives a Datsun. What's the early Datsuns? Oh yes, she's the beauty. His grandchildren said, "Grandpa, we will give you whatever car you want." He said, "No, I'm happy with this car." And the man has got a smile on his face. Even though the handbrake nearly fell off when I was driving, but did he care? He said, "Oh, chalo koi baat nahi." Carrying on. Happy, contentment, you see. Same thing. They were given a portion. No. We want more. We want more. I mean, here you're getting food from the heavens and it's nutrition. Everything is there. But no. We have been given this thing that variety is the spice of life. Allah doesn't say no to that. But He says there must be a point of shukr where you contain yourself. Otherwise, for the rest of your life, you'll be forever exploring. Yeah. I mean, I take my hats off to those Haji Saabs who go into an Italian restaurant and order curry. I take my hats off and say, "Oh yes." I mean, the waiter actually said to this Haji Saab, he said, "Sir, you've actually come to an Italian." He said, "No, I want curry. I want chana chaat." He said, "You come to the wrong restaurant." He said, "What are you, a restaurant are you? Can't you ask your chef to prepare it?" No? Anyway, so coming back to manna wa salwa. And Allah says, "Kulu minha tayyibatim ma razaqnakum." Eat from this. And وَمَا ظَلَمُونَا, and you didn't wrong us, وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ, but you wrong yourself in what you do. And then, having given them this thing, then He says, okay, now, Yusha bin Nun leads them into the holy city. Some say Jerusalem, some say other places, doesn't matter where. What matters is, right, enter this door and bend over. Some say prostrate, some say ruku. وَإِذْ قُلْ نَدْخُلُوا هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةَ فَكُلُوا مِنْهَا حَيْثُ شِئْتُمْ. So now you wanted more than manna and salwa. Here, come to this city. هَذِهِ الْقَرْيَةَ, Qarya is city. Come to this city. Some say the Qarya is Jerusalem. Some say it's others, Ramallah, or some say it's other places. Doesn't matter which place. And Allah says, okay, here you are. More variety for you. ادخلوا هذه القرية فكلوا منها حيث شئتم رغدا. Whatever you like. There's variety here for you. Don't worry. You couldn't be content with manna. Here you are. Carry on. However, I'm asking you as your creator, udkhulul baba. It's shi'tum ragadan wadkhulul baba. But if you read it udkhulul without the waw, udkhulul baba. And all of you enter the door sujjadan, in a state of sajda. Waqulu hittatun. And the word hittatun is some say Armenic word, or some say the language of the time, which means forgive our sins. That's all Allah wanted. Look, come through the door and just say whatever sins we've committed. This is another problem with victim mentality. There is very little istighfar. Well, I've been wronged. Why should I do istighfar? I've been wrong. But doing istighfar is a therapy which allows a person to overcome so much without even realizing. Istighfar. And all Allah said, to do sajda and do istighfar. And then naghfir lakum khatayakum, and I'll forgive all your. Ghafara yaghfiru means I'll do parda. I'll cover. There's a difference between waghfir lana, wa'fu anna, waghfir lana, warhamna. That's not my subject. But I'll cover your wrongs. Khatayakum, your wrongs. وَسَنَزِيدُ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. and I will increase the reward of those who are muhsineen. However, now look at this. They've been asked to do sajda and say hitta. What's wrong with that? What do? They make a mockery of it. They laugh. They joke. Oh yes, we've been told to go through the door. Can you imagine the scene? Ho ho ho! We've got to enter this door by doing a sajda. And they laughed. So they changed the word hitta to hinta. Then what happened? فَبَدَّلَ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا قَوْلًا غَيْرَ الَّذِي قِيلَ لَهُمْ. They changed the word that Allah told them to use, which was hitta, and they said baddala, they changed it to khinta. فَأَنزَلْنَا عَلَى الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا رِجْزًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. And we revealed upon them a disease from the sky. بِمَا كَانُوا يَفْسُقُونَ. Today we are understanding airborne disease. There's airborne disease in the Quran for you. رِجْزًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. Today science has discovered that disease can be airborne. The Quran 1400 years ago talks about the idea of airborne diseases thousands of years ago. رِجْزًا مِنَ, I mean, come on. This is an understanding of technology, is it not? رِجْزًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. What more? How easier could Allah have put it to you? رِجْزًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. And what was that رِجْزًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ? It was a virus. And according to most mufassirin, that virus, airborne virus, was ta'un, a disease called ta'un. And the first generation were finished with ta'un, they were. But the second generation developed some immune response, or developed some resistance, and they asked for forgiveness. Those who were forgiven were cured. That was the first time in human history that a virus had been implemented. But that virus, implemented thousands of years ago, remains till today. Up till today, some ulama have said ta'un refers to cancer. Some ulama have said ta'un refers to cysts or infection. It doesn't matter what it is. The point is that the Prophet ﷺ has said that ta'un finds, except where Allah Azza wa Jal tests His servant with ta'un, which I don't ask for you, the Prophet ﷺ said, except in the instance that Allah tests His servant with ta'un. Ta'un only comes upon a person which is death, which is fatal, where a person embraces obscenity in their life. This is one of the direct consequences of obscenity. Viral diseases are the consequences of human transgression in the context of obscenity. Oh yes, not floods, not other disasters, but ta'un, airborne disasters, are the result of the human morality. Now we can understand COVID. We have been told that COVID is a human invention. There may be some data that supports that. But ultimately, the reality is there were those people who were affected by it in a manner that defied their own common sense. The Prophet ﷺ 1400 years ago told us that if you suffer from ta'un, then upon you is a responsibility to stay put. Do not leave your town. I mean, this is not the World Health Organization talking. This is the Prophet ﷺ. That he understands that whilst it is airborne, the transmission of disease, human to human contact. 1400, if this is not a miracle, then what else is a miracle? Prophet ﷺ, stay put. Travel restrictions. Does that ring a bell? Oh, it does to me. 2.5 bloody years. I had to be in United Bloody Kingdom. Or should I say it in the Bradford accent? Bloody Kingdom. United Bloody Kingdom. 2.5 years I had to suffer here. Oh yes. Yeah. The Prophet said, stay where you are. Don't migrate. Don't go. Why? Because his nigah-e-nabuwwat, the eyes of Nubuwwat, could see the transmission of virus in this way. And history has testified that, and science has subsequently testified that. So, as a result of the transgression of Bani Israel, the human race continues to be affected by ta'un. And ta'un, and then subdivides into some Mufassirin have written that it has subcategories, it goes off into other molecular structures, and it actually mutates in some form for some people, whilst the same thing for other people, Allah creates antibodies within them that they can deal with them. بما كانوا يفسقون. So it was as a result of their fisk, their wrongdoings. It wasn't just because Allah tested them, it was because of their wrongdoing. And I'm going to quote something from Ibn Hazm. I don't really rate Ibn Hazm as someone who I would lift my eyebrows to, but he is the father, or a fatherly figure to the world of Salafi thinking. So there's no harm in quoting him here. He says in his book Zadul Ma'arij, he says that there are two kinds of ta'un. One is a physical ta'un, and one is a ta'un which is associated with your soul, which is tethered to your soul. Sometimes Allah allows certain evil souls to be in your company, and your soul catches the ta'un. What does that mean? Physically you're fine.
Would that be depression?
No, that's a bit harsh. Ta'un to the soul. Ibn Qayyim has actually alluded to something very big. This is a minefield. I could deliver a whole hour just on this, because the study of the soul is something that I've invested a serious, significant part of my life in, because for me, the Quran and Sunnah have been very open and frank about everything. But when it comes to the soul, Allah Himself says, وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. I've only given you a little bit of knowledge about this.